there is a belief that I hold. One that I conjured up over the course of a number of years, and I've been refining it down bit by bit as time were to go on. I call it the 4 divides. And the first divide, we're going to just go ahead and hop up into it. The first divide starts with spirit. Now, there is a certain... what would I say? There's a certain diaspora, multiple diasporas of the human experience that have perpetuated that this does not exist, or perpetuated it in a certain idea that not necessarily might come off as, say, inclusive, or it wouldn't be very dexterous in its thought. It's very rigid, very sticks to the colloquial, doesn't really allow for expansion, but is very rigid, very traditional, and very to the point, even in sometimes having quite amorphous and ominous sort of intentions when you read it verbatim. This is what I would say to that, to you who are listening. In order for you to first have existence, right? Or not even first, let's say as a baseline. Existence in and of itself is a baseline. When we remove it from linear thought that is the typical human line of thought, the typical human train of thought, the need for there to be a beginning or an end. When we remove that, we get a baseline. We get a baseline of existence just simply exists. Why? Again, outside of linear thought, there is no reason why. There is no need, because needs are a physical idea that we've been able to see so far. Needs are a physical necessity. When we talk about needs, we talk about the primal state. We talk about the body needing food, nutrients, oxygen out of air, water, shelter, anything that you can come up with that you would consider to be a need, something that you depend upon, or air quote depend upon, for the survival mechanism, the survival idea, the survival thought, because even survival in and of itself is something that is not necessarily something that you have to do. You do not have to survive. You are just, it is imposed upon you to survive, and the way you understand and take the impositions is how you are going to go about that. So bringing it back, there is no need for existence. Existence in and of itself does not require any human linear thought. It just is. I am that I am. You've probably heard that before. There is no need. Truly. What need would there really be? If you really just blow the brain out as much as you can, no matter how much you think about this, you will always go down the line of thought that something had to come, something had to come up, something had to come up after this thing, something had to create this thing, so on and so forth. It's a very human line of thought, because all humans ever perceive truly are one thing coming from another thing, or one thing being reconfigured into another thing. So when you apply that to everything else, based upon your current perception and your current science, as well as some of your own spirituality, you get this very rigid, very linear way of looking at existence in and of itself. You anthropocentrize existence. You humanize it. You look at it through only a human lens. And see, that is a big limiting factor, because when you only do that, you are only going to see it that way, and therefore you will get the complexities thereof that come with it. So, what I like to do is something far more expanded. Far more expanded. This is not to say that the linear human perspective is foolish, or it should not be pursued. It's a part of the process. Everything changes. Like, I had to also think linearly before I was able to think on the way that I do now. It's a part of the process. Now, granted, could that process have been shortened, made more efficient? Sure, but it didn't. So, it doesn't matter. I'm here now. That's the point. The moment is now. So, dialing it back, we exist. Everything exists. Everything that you cannot even perceive exists in some shape or form. Because if you cannot perceive it, you'll imagine it. And if you can imagine it, you just ensure that it exists. Because just because something does not exist in physical does not mean it cannot exist in a different form. Which is why everything exists. Everything. Now, getting to the idea of non-existence, there are many that would say that the idea of spirit, the idea of the world beyond the world does not exist. Well, okay. How can it not exist when the defined meaning of non-existence is a paradox unto itself? In order for the idea of non-existence to even exist, you had to cook it up, which meant that you had to exist. If existence can bear fruit to non-existence, fine, it's an idea. Okay, what are the qualities of this idea? Non-existence is typically seen as something that a human cannot perceive, because it's a human idea, and it is designed to be as something a human cannot perceive. Just because a human cannot perceive it does not mean it does not exist. That, to me, cancels out any of these other arguments. Because if you're just going to rely just on what I would consider the primitive for what it could be mechanisms that the current human species in this particular timeline uses for their way of gauging and looking at and perceiving and understanding the universe, you'd honestly be better off, just going into the woods and forgetting your stove and just, starting a fire with some flint and some wood and some kindling. You really aren't doing anything at that special. Now, this is not me discounting the current effort. The effort is great, and again, it's part of the process. But what I'm discounting is the pride, the ego, the egoistic part of it, where you would say, oh, we are so great, so superior. See, you don't want to do that, because then what happens, well, you can do it, but here's the consequence of doing it. The consequence of doing it is that you then create the perceived human construction of, oh, I'm fine, and then you create decadence, which is another perceived human construction, and then you slow up your progress. Now, if that is something that you want, you can express that, and that's fine. I don't have anything against what people actually want. What I'm here to do is figure out, what do you actually want? And I want to know that for sure. If you're willing to tell me, of course. But getting back to it. The baseline is that you exist. Okay? We have pretty much settled that, or I've settled that. Because this is my thought process, so I'm just sharing it with you. The baseline is that you exist. Alright? That is what spirit is. In its core essence is just being, existing. Now, I know that can sound a little obtuse to typical human perspective, but the point is to take it out of the typical linear perspective. You don't want to try to measure it. There's no measurement to it. There's no mathematics, because you would be measuring everything. That's eternity. You would be taking the time to measure everything. Measurements are for physical reality. The type of measurements physical beings use, or at least the current physical being that is humanity, and the current human consciousness and the current human intelligence, you don't really apply that all that much to things that are extracurricular of this place, that are a bit different, that are a shifted sort of reality. So, you exist. Have fun with that. You exist. That is how I prove it. I can prove it just by existing. I don't really need to cook up more than that. Everything else that's just there is just simply there. Like, personally, I believe all of the gods exist. Every god you can think of, every spirit, every sort of demon, every angel, everything. All of them exist. They all exist. Why? Because some part of existence has perceived it in some way. You are a part of existence. I am a part of existence. When we perceive things, well, they exist. They now exist in the form of energetic thought, which sometimes when you apply that energetic thought to the physical realm, you can manifest those things out of the things that are here. You can take energy and reconfigure it into other types and forms of energy, which is everything is. It's all a type of energy. Everything is a type of energy. Just changed, reconfigured, restructured. It's all the same material. Everything is quite literally made out of the very same materials. All the time. All the time. At least here in physical reality. So, yeah. That is the first divide. The first divide is that you are what you are. You exist. And see, when you come up with these ideas, it's a good baseline to go off of. A lot of people don't know who they are, what they want. They don't know. And very rarely do we have any sort of proper guidance to the immensely, eternally obtuse nature of everything that exists, of all that is, of the great I am. Some of us are given certain kinds of indoctrinations that we acquiesce to without prior knowledge or without having the ability to, not say having the ability, but not knowing that we have the ability to change our mind, being faced with consequences that are quite impositional against the position that we would prefer to take, things of that nature. And depending upon the situation, some things are okay, but most things aren't. Typically, I am one who believes in the freedom of spirit and the freedom of all things. Now, I also believe in helping others, helping them, aiding them, especially if they don't know something, helping them out, saving them from things that they may not be able to perceive ahead, things of that nature. Like if I see something that you can't see, I would like to, if you wanted of me to make you aware of it, or I would see if you want me to make you aware of it, and then I would go from there. But keeping all of that in mind, the main thing I'm trying to ensure that can be taken away from this particular divide is this. When you feel as though you don't know who you are, when you feel as though you don't know what's going on around you, when you feel as though you are lost, when you feel as though you are alone, when you feel as though even your own mind, even your own body, even your own emotions, which those are the other three divides we're going to go into, even when you feel that they're working against you, the way you recenter and you can rehome, this is a way, not the only way, but this is a way that I teach, is remembering that you are all of that already. And the only reason it is like that is because you are maintaining a perception, regardless of consequence or imposition. You are maintaining a perception that is what is happening to you. Now, things can be slightly different when we deal with external impositions. But your internal impositions, mainly when you're coming down to thought, and when those thoughts do manifest into the physical, in which then the physical becomes becomes the actual imposition. You are still in control. You have not lost control. Because if you lost control, then you wouldn't be here. If you lost control, you actually wouldn't exist at all. But funnily enough, guess what? There's no such thing as non-existence. You're always in control. Even so much that you can, in a controlled way, even if you trick yourself into not thinking so, even in a controlled way, you can feign not being in control. That's just how much you are in control of yourself. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is sort of a summary. Even though this is a bit long, this is a summary of the first divide. The first divide being spirit, the I am, the existence itself. That is you, me, all things that exist, everything down to the tiniest atom beyond the atom. Everything. So, stay tuned, beloveds, for the second divide, which is where I'm going to talk about emotional energies and thoughts being the second.